Wanted to ask you a little bit, Marianne, about the study about vocabulary, and especially in children who are toddlers, age 2, and whether that is a predictor of their future success as they enter school. What did your research look at?
The reason that we wanted to look at that is because I think it's an important question. Because if it is the case that you could tell at age 2 that that there's a signal that someone could be helped to do better in kindergarten or later life by intervening at age 2, then we thought that would be a great thing to look at. So people had thought in the studies that have been done that vocabulary at age 2 might be associated with better outcomes in kindergarten. But most of the studies were small, clinical groups of children, and they weren't really nationally representative, and they weren't big enough so that we could look at other things that might also be influencing the outcome that we cared about, which was functioning in kindergarten. So that if you have a study and you look at a bunch of 2-year-olds and you say, how many words do you say, what is your vocabulary? And then you look at them at age 5, they did see that those with higher vocabularies at 2 did better at age 5. But perhaps it might have been due to some other reasons as well, like poverty or parenting or low birth weight or physical problems. And in a small study, you can't really control for that. But we used a big study, a nationally representative sample of over 8,000 children who had data collected on their development at various points through their childhood, so that we were able to look at those other things. And even when we took those into account, we still found that vocabulary at age 2 had a larger vocabulary at age 2 had an effect on positive outcomes at kindergarten.
Can you give me a couple of details about how researchers did the measurement? Was it a survey?
Yeah, that was it was a really well done study. It had hands-on, and there were some parent report, and actually the vocabulary was the parents. It was a standard instrument that questionnaire that was administered, and then they could report on the words that they said. So it was a standardized thing that the parents completed. There were also other data that were taken from medical records and standardized testing of the child themselves. So that's how it's a powerful data set because it has both parent report and objective measurements of the child. And at kindergarten, also teacher reports as well.
Could you tell me a little bit more about the kinds of words that researchers were looking for? Was there a measuring stick?
Common words that you would hope that they might know, house, things that, and putting some words together. Although this was just words, but single words, but words that you might expect that a 2-year-old might know because of their experience. Table, different kinds of fruit, naming of different kinds of fruit and animals and those sorts of things.
Being associated with behavior as you enter kindergarten. Can you make the bridge for me? Can you tell me why?
It's interesting that to think about that. I think the theory, and from I should be clear that our study could not understand why. We are showing, our results look at what the vocabulary was at age 2 and those outcomes at 5, but we don't really have a way to tell that. But theories are that if children can express themselves more fluently and completely, then there's less frustration and there's more chance that they'll be able to regulate their behavior and express themselves so they don't need to act out.
Marianne, did researchers find patterns in terms of socioeconomic?
Yeah, more socioeconomic. I would say that that children who are raised in poverty environments sometimes don't have exposure to some of the learning materials and other things that can help with vocabulary development. So we did find those. That's been found in other research, and we found that as well. We also found effects for if you had low birth weight at birth, so that you were, maybe perhaps a little behind from that. But the interesting thing is that since we had such a big sample, we were able to control for those things and still find that even when we took those into account, the vocabulary mattered for functioning in kindergarten.
When you see these trends and see that even at this earliest age, the skills, the vocabulary is so important, what are the implications when we're starting to get this body of knowledge?
Well, I think the biggest implication is that, or the good news, I think, is that at age 2, it's a signal that we can pick up on a bit, and then we can do some things, help parents to facilitate vocabulary development in their children.
We're talking about an age where it's really early enough to intervene.
Right, exactly. So that's the nice thing. You want to find something that allows you to have some time to make a difference, and again, it's a signal. It's not definitive. It just is sort of something that we can say that, gee, if we see that the vocabulary development is not is on the low side at age 2, then healthcare providers and parents might think about ways that they could stimulate that and facilitate that. And some of those ways, I think everybody thinks first, well, be sure that you read to your children. And of course, that's a key thing. And there are programs such as Reach Out and Read, in which pediatricians provide books at each well-child visit, so that age-appropriate books that help families to interact with their children in reading those books. And I think there are some other things in addition to that. For one thing I think is very important is not only reading what's on the page, but also interacting with the child about what's going on in the story. There are actually some books, like there's one called Goodnight Gorilla, that's mostly pictures and some words, but the pictures allow the parent to say, or who's ever reading to the child, I see this happening, what do you think? Can you tell me what you see in this picture? Those sorts of things. It helps the child to have to think about what they're going to say and express their feelings. And parents then model that behavior by saying, I see this and it looks like that, and then that helps them to then say it back. And that is not even just around reading books, but just in general as you're going about your day. When there are events that are going on, you're going to the store, engaging a child in conversation and pointing out different things that are going on in the store, and what do you think about that, and asking for a response and helping them to express themselves is helpful. Another thing kids really like is word games and songs, so that thinking about, for example, most people know the rhyme, Itsy Bitsy Spider went up the water spout. So if you were working with your child, singing with your child with that, you could leave that last bit out and let them fill it in. So Itsy Bitsy Spider went up the, and then they fill it in. So it's a game and it's fun, and you're asking them to respond to you.
How early should parents start?
As soon as you can, even before age 2, of course. There are ways to, I mean, obviously attention spans build over time, but there are books for every age, and there are materials for, you don't have to have a bunch of fancy books, just really talking with children even before you can expect that they're going to be talking to you. It's going in there and it's having an effect.
I know every child develops a little bit differently, so sometimes timelines are different per child. But at about what age do children start forming those words?
Around 9 to 10 months you start to hear mama, dada, and some other words like that. Then as you get through into toddlerhood, first you get more single words, many of which you're not quite sure, you're trying to guess what they are, but they're trying to make those sounds. And then they start to put 2 words together and then 3 words together as you go along.
How about interventions right before kids go into kindergarten? What can parents at that age and what can teachers do to try to narrow any of the gaps?
I think an important thing is to try and get the most high quality childcare that you can find. So high quality childcare has a lower child to caregiver ratio, so there's more interaction time with the children. You certainly want to look to see to visit the school and see how the caregivers are interacting. Are they engaging children in conversation? Are the activities such that that it's enriching in that way. Are there materials around books and those sorts of things as well?
The findings from your research, in what ways could they impact policy? What do we need to look at?
I think that more support for the kind of enriching preschool environments that we were just talking about would definitely help. Universal pre-K would be wonderful. I think more the Reach Out and Read is a program that provides materials to pediatricians that are part of that program, and there are other sorts of things like that, not just one, but more of those sorts of efforts that allow families to be exposed to that counseling so they understand that. So that all helps.
Is there anything I did not ask you that you think is important for people to know?
I just would like to emphasize that it's really important that this not be looked upon as work and a job and, oh my goodness, we must make sure that we drill our children on a certain number of things. That it's really the way that it will be most effective is happy, playful interaction with adults that is enjoyable on both sides. And that's really those conversations that that happen that are engaging the child and the grown-up are the thing that are most valuable.
Tell me where your undergrad is and where your master's
Okay, so I started
doctorate.
out as a nurse, and I got a bachelor in nursing at University of Iowa. Then I got a master's in nursing at Yale University, and I'm a pediatric nurse practitioner. Then I got interested in public health, so I got a master's in public health from Harvard, from the School of Public Health there. And then my PhD is from the University of Michigan in sociology and demography. More than you want to know.